Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to talk about an awesome smallmouth bass fishing technique. Whenever they're shallow, whenever you have clear water, specifically pre-spawn, spawn, post-spawn, there's always smallmouth that live shallow depending on your body of water. If you fish small rivers, streams, stuff like that, it will work. It works anywhere that those fish live shallow. St. Lawrence River, Champlain, you'll always have some smallmouth that are living up shallow or suspended or something like that. And that's going to be the hair jig. It's not a very talked about technique. It has started to become more popular over the past couple years as people are winning some tournaments on the St. Lawrence River with this guy right here. And that's actually why we've started practicing this technique. So we have a tournament on the St. Lawrence, the Toyota Series this year. I wanted to practice this technique and learn how to get good at it so that I can go do that technique up on the St. Lawrence River. So there's a few things we're going to talk about here. Specialty setup, you kind of need one. I'm not going to say you need it 100%. I fished around with this all day today and it was amazing. I probably could have done just about the same with just a regular medium light. So we're going to talk about everything you need to know about the hair jig today. We're going to start with our rod and reel combo. So right here, this is the Cashin Icon spinning series, and it's a 7'6" fast action medium light. I mean, this thing is like a noodle. It bends all the way down here into the butt section. I can literally double this rod over in half. It's crazy. It's like fishing with a steelhead rod. I do a lot of steelhead fishing. It's literally like fishing like with a shorter steelhead rod. I use like a 9-footer for steelhead. If I use this in Erie, I could catch a bunch of steelhead with it too. It's crazy. So it's honestly a lot of fun to catch these fish like this, just because of how light the tackle is. But that's part of the key to get this bait out there. So this bait weighs literally nothing. It's whatever the jig head weighs. This hair weighs nothing, and it's very not aerodynamic. So it's just a big poof of hair, zero weight. The jig head's your weight, but you need a light jig head so that it just flows through the water naturally. This is actually a heavy one. I have an 1/8 ounce on here today. Somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 ounce is what you're fishing. So you need a very light rod. This rod's rated from a 1/16 ounce to a 1/2 ounce. So that hits that lower end mark. That 1/8 ounce is perfect in there. You can get a good long cast with this bait and get it to those fish. Shimano Sedona 2500, I've talked about this reel tons of times on my channel. It's like 80 bucks and it's amazing for a spinning reel. Has a good drag system, and I fish the 2500 size. You could use the 3000. The bigger the spool, the better. You're going to get a farther cast with that bait because that line will come off easier. I like the 2500s just because my hands are small, and honestly, all of my reels are 2500s, so I just wanted it to be the exact same. And I like the single handle over like the double handle. So that's the couple reasons why I picked the 2500. When it comes to your line and your leader, this is the most important part besides your rod to get that bait out there. Number one, I always fish 15-pound lime green braid. You've seen me do it numerous times. This is the only time I will not use 15-pound. I'm using 10. I could even use 8 if I wanted to. You're fishing very light tackle doing this technique. So I have 10-pound braid on here, and then I have a 6-pound fluorocarbon leader. I almost never go that light. I fish 8-pound a lot. That's usually what I go to. 6-pound is what I have on here for today. So a super light leader, super light line, and a very whippy rod is going to allow you to get a very far cast with this bait. So with this thing only being an 1/8 of an ounce, I was bombing this thing out there. And that's the key to this technique. You need a really far cast to get this thing away from the boat so that you can get a long retrieve. Those fish will come up and track it. They'll follow it, and eventually they'll bite it. They're just curious about it. They don't know what that little black poof going through the water is, and they'll just track it down and eat it. But if it's right next to the boat, they're going to swim away. I had 2 today. I didn't give them enough distance. I had 2 big ones, a 4 and probably about a 5 to 6 pound smallmouth swimming in a pack together. They were chasing it up to the boat. They saw the boat and swam away. If they would have had a few more feet, they might have bit that bait, but that's part of the game. You will have followers that don't commit to it. But if you can get that far enough cast, you will have followers that do commit to it. When it comes down to the business end down here, this is super simple. The only hair jig I know of that would be worth buying on the market, I think, is the Seth Fighter Fighter Fly from Outcast Tackle. I've never fished one, so don't take my word for it. If you're looking for one that you can buy in store and just go fish, that would be the one I would recommend because I've heard good reviews on it, but I've never fished one. But that would be the only one that I would recommend there. This guy that I have in my hand, this is my own. I make them myself. I took my ball head jig mold that I've done a video on my channel, and if you'd like to see an entire in-depth video on how to make one of these guys and save some money, I think I made them for like $1.50 a piece, and I think the fighter flies are like $5 a piece or something like that. If you want to see a video on how to do that, leave a comment down below. But all I did was take my ball head jig mold. I bought Gamakatsu size 1 jig hooks, put it in there, molded the 1/8 ounce lead on here, painted it with some powder paint, and then I hand tied the marabou onto my jig itself. So nice and fluffy there, and it flows through the water. I know it's built the way that I want it to be built. And then the last thing, we'll show you how to rig this up on the water when we're actually fishing it today, but I got a chunk of a Senko on there just to give it a little bit extra weight to be able to cast. So on top of the whippy rod, all the light line, everything like that, 1/8 ounce jig, which is pretty heavy for this technique, and then that chunk of Senko. This thing flies when you throw it. So it's a perfect technique when you have some clear water, some smallmouth that are curious fish. They line up perfectly together. We even caught some largemouth on it today too, which I was absolutely shocked by. I've never really seen anybody use this thing for largemouth. I know I've caught largemouth on hair jigs before, but a different way of fishing, but I don't see why it wouldn't work. So probably would catch anything with this bait right here. So let's head out on the water. We'll show you how and where to fish this thing, and we are going to catch some fish along the way today because we're actually wrapping up for the day. But this was the killer this morning, and we caught quite a few fish on the hair jig technique. It's something this fish never really see. Sometimes that sneaky technique will catch some fish. So now that we talked about what the hair jig is, how to fish it, all that good information, let's go ahead and throw this thing around and see if we can catch a couple big pre-spawn smallmouth bass on this guy right here. This is what it looks like, gently dipped in the water. Still a little poofy, but not really changed much there. And then as it continues to get wet, it literally just looks like a bunch of hair wrapped around a jig head. So hence the name hair jig. So we're gonna just throw this thing around, and we're gonna wind it around and see if we can catch us a big smallmouth on it. Basically what we're looking for is good pre-spawn or spawning areas for these smallmouth to be. We got 55-degree water temperature, so these fish should be moving up relatively soon. Smallmouth do spawn a little bit colder than largemouth. Now, they might not quite be on beds yet. I almost can guarantee they won't be. Smallmouth are a little bit easier to catch than largemouth, but there's that time in between when they're actually on bed and easy to catch off the beds, and then when they're actually scouting around looking for areas to spawn, there's that time where it's always a little bit tough to catch fish, especially largemouth, but smallmouth too. And this is one of the techniques that can get them even if they're not actually locked on beds yet. So we'll just cast this thing around. Like we have this dock right here, perfect area for one to hide underneath there. So we'll just go ahead and wind it right down the front, and we got one. I don't know if it's a big one, but that's a perfect example. I wound it right down the front of that dock right there, and he came out and grabbed it. We're gonna go ahead, oh, he's a little guy. But that's the perfect example right there. This is a little male, probably staging up here, ready to spawn. He was probably up there looking for a bed, waiting to get on bed. That little hair jig just came crawling by the front of that dock there. He couldn't resist coming out and grabbing it. And that's the first one of the day. So we're gonna go ahead and let him go. We're gonna try and catch some much bigger ones than that. And let's see if we can get back to it. There's one. It's a largemouth. What? All right. So, hair jig, while it is meant for smallmouth, it will catch everything. It'll probably catch crappies. It'll catch all kinds of stuff. Fish have no idea what it is, what it looks like. They just like to bite it. That is two very quick fish, and they seem to be biting well today. So we're gonna keep at it with the hair jig. There we go. Another one. And this is why you need that long parabolic rod, not only to make those far casts, but like this fish is going crazy, jumping, doing all kinds of stuff. It keeps that small hook in its mouth. Like we talked about, I'm pouring these with literally a size 1 hook, not a 1/0, a 1/1. It's like this big. I could play this fish all day and it would not come off. We can go over here, reel up our slack a little bit. Go ahead and bring him over here. And we got him. So they are downright eating that hair jig for one, but that rod is very important to make sure you keep them on back to the boat, especially when you're using that light line. The only way to get that far cast is the combination of things we talked about. You have to have that light line. You have to have that long, flexible rod. That's gonna give you the farthest cast with that bait, that big spool. All of that though plays at a disadvantage when you're hooking those fish on a very long cast. You might not get a very good hook set, but that rod, that fine wire sharp point will drive that hook through, keep it going in their mouth, and make sure you land fish just like that over and over and over again. That bait has a very high landing percentage if you fish the right setup, as with any bait, but that one especially, if you use the right setup across the board, all the right equipment, you'll have a very high landing percentage with that bait. All right, and let that one be a lesson on why you need to check your line often, especially when you're fishing with a 6-pound test. We're using very light leader here, and I just broke off a big one literally on the hook set because my line had a fray in it, and I did not check my knot after catching 3 bass in a row. But I wanted to show you, one, what I'm tying this on with. So I got a Palomar knot here. I use that for pretty much everything. I get asked that a lot on a lot of my videos. What knots do I use? Palomar knot to tie all my baits on, and Alberto knot for all my leaders, and that is it. I keep it really simple. Learn to tie a couple good knots and they'll take care of you. And this is what that hair jig looks like when you just take it out of the pack or tie it yourself or whatever. This hasn't been in water yet. It's completely fluffed up. And then the last thing that I like to do, just to add a little bit of mass to this bait and to get it to cast a little bit further, I have a Senko here, and I just measure it up so that it doesn't show behind the hook point or the feathers or anything like that. And I just take this and trim off a tiny little chunk just like that. So 1 Senko is good for a whole bunch of baits. We just go ahead and thread that guy on there just like this. And then this is the hard part, to get a little drop of super glue on there. You don't have to do this because if you get it on the feathers, it will mess up the action of the bait. But I just like to get a little drop of super glue in there just so that it hangs on there, because you don't really, as long as you're retying and you're not breaking these off, like you're not going to go through a bunch of these hair jigs. You can see how good that hair flows in the wind. Looks even better under the water. So we got our hair jig all tied up again. I got line everywhere. We're going to lay that right there. That little drop of super glue just helps keep that chunk of trailer on there for a little bit longer, so you don't have to, like if you catch a couple fish, usually when you have like a trailer on a bait and it starts sliding down, you don't have to get in there and mess up the hair and all that. I just like to get it all set up so now this dude is ready to fish. I don't have to do anything else. I just have to cast away and catch some bass. So let's catch some more. There we go. That feels like a good one too. Yeah, that's definitely got to be oh, it's a giant smallmouth. Oh, he's not that big. He's not that big at all. He's all right. That's actually not a bad fish. Come here, buddy. Look at that. He's fat. Oh my gosh. Hair jig right in the roof of his mouth. I am loving this. I mean, they are downright chewing this hair jig today. It is not even funny. See, he was not coming off. This is why you pour that hook right there. So that #1 hook is small enough to keep them pegged, but it gets right behind their jawbone in that soft spot there. It's kind of hard to see. But, I mean, they do not come off. He's got it all mangled up. We'll catch us another one, no problem. That is a tubby guy. We're gonna get a weight on him and get back to fishing. There we go. That might be a big smallmouth. That's definitely a big smallmouth. It's a decent one. And all we've been doing is continually paralleling these docks. We're looking for those fish that are just staging up, getting ready to make a bed. We're gonna go ahead and grab this guy right here. This hair jig has been a ton of fun to fish today. Ugh. He's actually not that big. Honestly though, it's so much fun fishing this thing, and honestly, on that light rod, it's a ton of fun fighting them too. They pull hard, they're fun to catch, and it's just such an easy technique to do. You don't have to do anything special. You just cast it out and line it in nice and slow. No additional action needed. Catch fish just like that. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to see another killer smallmouth technique, check this video out right here. Hit that subscribe button down below, and thanks for watching.